I found out my wife was cheating, so I sold my company shares for $10 to my brother and moved the rest into his startup. When I gave her the divorce papers, she yelled, "I deserve half." Then she saw the joint account balance. Her lawyer was panicking. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. All right, Reddit. Wasn't supposed to be home that day. Conference got canceled, so I came back early to surprise my wife. Walked in on her making out with some dude who looked fresh out of college. He panicked. Her reaction? "Don't be sensitive, it's no big deal." I said, "Sure, it's not," and walked out. She thought that was it. It wasn't. Her lawyer was sweating 2 weeks later. Here's how I played it. I, 36 male, run a logistics consulting business in Arlington, Virginia. Been married to Vicky, 35 female, for 8 years. Vicky hosts a podcast called Modern Women Talk that has a modest following, maybe 5,000 listeners on a good day. She started it with 2 friends from college after getting laid off from her marketing job. They recorded weekly in our spare room, which I'd helped convert with some basic sound treatment. Nothing fancy, just enough to make it sound decent. I actually spent around $2,500 setting up that room for her. Acoustic panels, a decent mixer, 3 microphones with shock mounts, sound dampening curtains, and some decent lighting. When I walked in, the house had this weird silence. Not peaceful, just wrong. I dropped my laptop bag by the stairs and headed toward the kitchen, expecting to hear her recording. Instead, I heard moaning. Not trying to be quiet moaning. Full volume, don't give a damn moaning. I followed the sound down the hall to the spare room. The door was cracked open. That's when I saw Vicky with her back against the wall, wrapped around some guy. He looked like the sound tech she'd mentioned hiring a few weeks back. Probably around 25. Still had his stupid beanie on. It wasn't even the good equipment wall with the foam panels I'd installed. It was the bare drywall I hadn't gotten around to treating yet. That detail stuck with me for some reason. Like they couldn't even be bothered to use the nice part of the room I'd set up. The guy saw me first. His face went white, and he scrambled to pull up his pants. "What the fuck?" I said, standing in the doorway. Vicky's head whipped around. Instead of looking ashamed, she looked annoyed. She adjusted her clothes like she was just finishing a workout. "Jesus, Tom. I thought you were in Dallas until Sunday." "Yeah, clearly," I said, my voice ice cold. "That's why you brought him to our house." The tech guy tried to squeeze past me, mumbling something that sounded like "sorry, man," without making eye contact. "You might want to zip up your pants all the way, buddy," I said, as he bolted down the hallway. Vicky crossed her arms. "Great. Now I need to find a new sound editor." That's when I lost it. 8 years of marriage, and that was her response? "Are you fucking kidding me right now?" I shouted, slamming my hand against the doorframe so hard it stung. "I catch you screwing some hipster in our house, and you're worried about your goddamn podcast?" Vicky actually took a step back, surprised by my outburst. I never yelled. Ever. "Lower your voice," she said, suddenly defensive. "The neighbors will hear." "Oh, now you're worried about noise. Because you two weren't exactly keeping it down a minute ago. It just happened, okay? It's not a big deal. We've been having problems for months. Don't act surprised." Problems meant she'd been distant and irritable. I'd been working longer hours to land new clients. Typical marriage rough patch. Not screwing the sound guy rough patch. I took a deep breath, my momentary rage subsiding into something colder. "You know what? You're right. This isn't a big deal." I turned and walked out, grabbed my bag, got in my car, and drove to my brother Brody's place across town. Brody handed me a spare key without asking questions. That night, sitting on his balcony, I told him what happened. "Jesus," he said, shaking his head. "And she wasn't even sorry?" "Acted like I was interrupting a business meeting," I said. "Like I should apologize for catching her." Brody snorted. Classic Vicky. "Remember when she showed up 3 hours late to my wedding rehearsal because she was networking? Then got mad when mom said something? I hadn't thought about that in years. Or the time she forgot my company launch party. Or how she'd stopped asking about my day around year 3 of our marriage. She also did that thing at Dad's funeral," Brody added, "when she was on her phone during the service, then claimed it was an urgent client issue that couldn't wait. Then I saw her posting on Instagram later that day. That's when clarity hit me. This wasn't about love or even betrayal. It was about respect. Vicky hadn't just cheated. She'd dismissed me entirely. And I wasn't about to play the devastated husband. I was going to make sure she regretted underestimating me. Next morning, I sat across from Ms. Parker in her office on the 12th floor of an office building in Alexandria. Rain tapped against the windows as I laid out my plan. No small talk. I want to transfer my 70% of the consulting firm to Brody, I said, sliding a folder across her desk. She raised an eyebrow. For how much? $10. She leaned back. Tom, you know what I'm going to say. I do. Tell me anyway. She opened the folder, glanced at the draft. If you transfer this now, right before filing for divorce, it's going to get challenged as a fraudulent conveyance. No judge will ignore the timing. I'm counting on the challenge, I replied. That got her attention. Explain. Vicky won't go after money straight. She'll posture, negotiate. But if she thinks this firm is part of the prize, she'll dig in and demand half. This way, I force her to fight over something she has no legal claim to. I inherited this business from my dad before I ever met her. She'll claim transmutation, Parker said, tapping her pen. Say the value was commingled, that your work during marriage grew the equity. Let her. That's a long paper trail to argue against. All she'll prove is that I made something valuable. Not that she built it with me. She couldn't even tell you what my company actually does beyond something with trucks. Parker studied me for a moment, eyes narrowing slightly. She had a reputation. Analytical, precise. The lawyer executives called when things got messy. You're not playing defense, she said finally. Number, I'm going to war. She sighed, then turned to her computer and began typing. Fine. We'll timestamp the agreement today, but delay execution until 36 hours before filing. That gives us a small cushion of deniability. I'm timing everything down to the hour. Does Brody know he's about to become the target of a legal battle? I smiled faintly. He suggested it. What I didn't tell Parker was that Brody and I had already spent 3 hours the night before, mapping out every financial move I needed to make. My brother majored in economics before starting his software company. He understood the chess game better than I did. A week later, I stood in line at the bank, waiting to sign off on 2 transfers that would make Vicky's future legal team lose their minds. First, $38,000 from my personal business account into Brody's Software Development LLC as an expansion investment. The account was mine alone, opened 2 years before I met Vicky. Second transfer, $27,000 to pay off business debts I'd co-signed for a warehouse management system that had failed to deliver last year. I'd personally guaranteed the loan, but kept it separate from the main company books. Paying it now served 2 purposes: eliminated debt that could be counted as marital liability and reduced my visible net worth. Mr. Harrison, the bank manager said, stepping from her office, we flagged these transfers for review. Of course they did. I spent over an hour in her office verifying everything: source of funds, business relationship with Brody, legitimacy of the debts. I showed her the LLC operating agreement, the expansion business plan, the original loan documents, everything dated, organized, legitimate. She eventually nodded. Everything looks clean. Just unusual timing. Sometimes timing is everything, I said. By the time I walked out, the funds were moving. Ms. Parker had signed off on every form, every document in the paper trail. Investment agreement, debt satisfaction notices, bank confirmations. Everything documented, everything legal. Next stop, setting up my new account at a credit union Brody used for his business. Basic checking with a $1,200 opening deposit to cover rent, food, gas. Clean start, no transfers from shared accounts, nothing Vicky could flag as suspicious. Then I logged into our old joint account, the one we hadn't touched together in over a year, but that she still occasionally checked when feeling financially responsible. Balance, $10.18. I left exactly $10. That account once held significant savings, but I'd stopped using it long ago after we'd quietly moved into separate financial orbits. Vicky had her podcast income and part-time marketing gigs. I had my consulting fees and distributions. But this account, she still mentioned it whenever her parents asked about our finances. So I gave her a symbol, a number she couldn't miss, and a message she'd read exactly as intended. You get what you invested. That night, Ms. Parker called to confirm the transfers had cleared, and the investment in Brody's LLC was properly documented. Airtight, pre-marriage funds, legitimate business purpose, full documentation. This isn't just asset protection, she said after a pause. No, I replied. It's a statement. What I didn't realize until 3 days later was that I'd forgotten to unlink our shared Amazon account. I was setting up deliveries to Brody's place when I noticed Vicky was still logged in as the primary user. I quickly created a new account, but not before she'd have gotten notifications about my purchases, basic household items for my temporary living situation. A stupid oversight that could have tipped her off. I immediately changed all my other passwords, but kept wondering what else I might have missed. I'd spent so much time thinking about the big financial moves that I nearly screwed myself with something small. Had to be more careful. Vicky might play dumb about business, but she was smart enough to connect dots once she had reason to look. Looking at my to-do list, I realized I needed to secure my digital life fully. I spent the evening changing every password, setting up two-factor authentication on my accounts, and creating a new email address for business and legal correspondence. When you're preparing for divorce, it's the details that can sink you. I wasn't going to let a forgotten password or linked account derail my strategy. Vicky was recording her podcast with her two co-hosts, Carly and Megan, when the courier arrived. They were discussing relationship red flags of all things, with Vicky offering advice about communication and partnership. Rich coming from someone I'd caught with her pants down a week earlier. The doorbell rang, and I heard her tell the others to hold that thought as she went to answer it. Through the security camera app on my phone, I watched her open the door and accept a thick, blue envelope sealed with a private service sticker. She looked confused, then irritated as she signed for it. She brought it back to the recording area, telling the others it was probably just some paperwork from Tom's company. She tore it open casually, still half engaged in conversation. By the time she reached the second page, her voice trailed off mid-sentence. "Vicky?" Carly asked. "You okay?" Vicky's face transformed, not with sadness or fear, but pure rage. "That calculating son of a bitch," she hissed, forgetting her mic was hot. "What is it?" Megan asked. "Tom's filing for divorce," Vicky snapped, "and he's... Wait, what the heck?" She couldn't even finish the sentence. The recording abruptly ended. 3 missed calls hit my phone within minutes. Inside that envelope was the divorce petition, itemized, dated, and perfectly delivered. The asset summary showed everything. A 70% firm stake sold for $10, $38,000 invested in Brody's LLC, $27,000 in paid business debts, and the final balance of our shared account, $10. Vicky called my number. Blocked. She called again. Blocked. Her lawyer, Ms. Reed, called Ms. Parker 8 times that day. 8 emails, 4 voicemails, even a text marked, "Urgent response needed." I didn't respond. I wasn't hiding. I was watching. Brody and I were reviewing software specs when the call logs started coming in. He glanced at my phone and laughed. "Looks like Vicky got the paperwork. Right on schedule." "How much you want to bet she's already called her mom to say you blindsided her?" "No bet," I said. "That was probably call number 2, right after her lawyer." Brody shook his head. "Remember when she told everyone at Thanksgiving that your business was just getting by the same year you doubled revenue? Like you were some struggling startup instead of a company billing 7 figures." "She never could keep numbers straight," I said, "except her Instagram followers." I watched it unfold from a distance. Not with pleasure, with certainty, because this wasn't revenge. It was precision. Years of being predictable, calculated, steady. She assumed I'd break down, beg her to reconsider, offer to forgive her. She never expected this. The courier wasn't just delivering legal paperwork. He was dropping the first domino, and I made sure she felt the impact before she even knew the rules of the game. At 2:13 a.m., my phone lit up with a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "You fucking coward," Vicky slurred into the phone. "You couldn't even talk to me first? Just papers and lawyers? Like you talked to me before sleeping with your sound guy?" I replied, instantly regretting engaging. "That was different," she spat. "At least I didn't try to hide money and steal everything." "I'm not doing this, Vicky. Talk to your lawyer." "Oh, I will," she said, her voice suddenly cold. "And when I'm done, you'll wish you'd never played these games. You think you're so smart, but you have no idea what's coming." She hung up. I sat there in Brody's dark guest room, wondering if I'd just made a tactical error by answering. The voicemail would have been better evidence. I recorded the call info and exact timestamp in a document I was keeping, a running log of all interactions. You never know what might matter later. I'd read enough Reddit divorce horror stories to know documentation is everything. The next morning, I woke up to 3 texts from Vicky sent at 3:47 a.m. "You think you're so clever with your little business tricks? My lawyer says what you did is illegal. Hope it was worth throwing away 8 years?" I screenshot everything but didn't respond. Just more evidence for the file. It didn't take long. Within a week, Ms. Reed had filed 3 separate motions. One challenging the transfer of my firm's shares as fraudulent conveyance, another demanding an injunction on the LLC investment, and a third attempting to freeze all remaining assets under my name pending court review. But that was just the legal front. The personal attack started next. First came the texts from mutual friends. "Vicky said you emptied the accounts and left her with nothing. Is that true? Hey, heard things got ugly with you guys? Vicky's really upset. Why did you just spring divorce papers on her without talking first? I responded with simple facts. Vicky cheated, I filed for divorce, and all financial moves were legitimate and documented. Then came the call from my mother. Thomas James Harrison, she started. Never a good sign when she used my full name. Did you really empty your accounts before filing for divorce? Mom, it's not. Vicky's mother called me in tears. Said you're financially abusing her daughter. That you planned this for months. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Mother, Vicky was cheating on me. In our house. A pause. Well, that doesn't mean you can just take all the money. I didn't take. I stopped myself. Can we talk about this later? I'm meeting with my lawyer in 20 minutes. Just tell me you're not being vindictive, she said. That's not how your father and I raised you. I wanted to explain about premarital assets and legitimate business transactions, but knew it would fall on deaf ears. My mother had always loved Vicky. I'm handling it legally and fairly, I said finally. That's all I can say right now. She sighed. Well, Karen says Vicky is devastated. Of course, Karen, Vicky's mother, would say that. She'd never heard a version of events where her daughter wasn't the victim. My mother had always seen Vicky as the daughter she never had. When we first got married, I thought it was great that they were close. Now it felt like another front in the war. Vicky knew exactly what she was doing by getting our mothers involved. Ms. Parker called me when the court documents hit her desk. She wants everything, she said, tapping the pile. They're claiming the share sale was a sham transaction to defraud the marital estate. I set my coffee down, unfazed. Let them try. Tom, Parker said, tilting her head. They've also asked for an emergency hearing. They want the judge to void the share transfer immediately and issue retroactive financial controls. They think it'll scare me. She nodded. Will it? No. We met in court 3 days later, a standard family law courtroom with uncomfortable benches and fluorescent lighting. Vicky sat at the petitioner's table next to Reed, wearing an outfit that screamed responsible adult, subtle makeup, sensible blazer, expression of wounded dignity. She glanced at me once, eyes narrowing slightly before looking away. Reed stood and began her performance. She talked about betrayal, deception, financial manipulation. She held up the investment agreement like it was evidence in a murder trial. Who moves $65,000 days before filing for divorce? She asked, looking toward the judge. Parker stood when Reed finished. No notes, no dramatic gestures. She pointed out calmly that the consulting firm was inherited prior to marriage, that its growth had been consistent, well documented, and managed almost exclusively through premarital structures. Inheritances are separate property under Virginia law, Your Honor, she said plainly, even if her client finds the timing distasteful. As for the investment, she placed the certified LLC documents, business plan, and pre-marriage account ledgers neatly before the court clerk. Every dollar came from an account opened 2 years before Mr. Harrison and Ms. Cooper were married. The funds were never commingled. The investment has a clear business purpose and full documentation. The judge flipped through the documents slowly. Reed fumed. Vicky sat with perfect posture, jaw tight. Then came the ruling, preliminary, but enough to draw a line. The court denied the request to void the firm transfer and denied the motion to reverse the LLC investment. Vicky was awarded a modest temporary support amount, but her request for legal fees was rejected. The judge noted quite directly her income from the podcast and marketing work. Vicky stood up abruptly. This is bullshit! The judge looked up, eyebrows raised. Excuse me, Ms. Cooper? He planned this for months. He's hiding money. The judge sighed, removing his glasses. Ms. Cooper, please sit down or I'll hold you in contempt. But he... Sit down. The judge's voice was tired but firm. This court operates on evidence, not accusations. Vicky slowly sank back into her chair, face flushed. The courtroom fell into uncomfortable silence. As I was saying, the judge continued, the emergency motions are denied. We'll revisit these matters during regular discovery. He glanced between us. I strongly suggest both parties remember that emotional outbursts do not help your respective cases. Outside the courthouse, Parker adjusted her glasses and exhaled. That could have gone worse, she muttered. Judge Wilson doesn't usually let outbursts slide. He felt sorry for her, I said. That evening, Brody texted me a screenshot from Carly's Instagram story. It showed Vicky, Carly, and Megan at a bar with the caption, supporting our girl through the storm. Men are trash. Classy, Brody texted. She cheats, you file, and somehow you're trash. Of course. I was eating takeout and reviewing some client projections when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Vicky's sound guy, the one I'd caught her with. Hey man, I just wanted to say I'm sorry about what happened. I didn't know she was married at first. Yeah, sure he didn't. I didn't bother responding. Just another screenshot for the file. The social media campaign started next. Not from Vicky directly. She was too careful for that. But Megan, the most vocal of her podcast co-hosts, posted a long rant about men who use financial warfare in divorce, and how the system favors calculating husbands who plan ahead. She never used my name, but she included enough details that anyone who knew us would recognize the situation. She ended with a call for followers to support women dealing with financial manipulation by subscribing to their podcast. That afternoon, I received an email from a client asking if everything was okay. He'd seen some concerning posts from people connected to my wife. 3 more similar messages followed. I drafted a simple, professional email to my client list explaining that I was going through a divorce, that some unfortunate social media posts might be circulating, and that my business operations remained completely unaffected. I thanked them for their understanding and discretion. 2 days later, Brody called me. Dude, Vicky's friend just tried to connect with me on LinkedIn. Megan or Carly? Megan. Then she immediately messaged asking if I'd pressured you into hiding assets through my company. I laughed despite myself. What did you say? Nothing yet, but I saved the screenshot. Forward it to Parker. That evening, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. You think you're so smart with your little financial games? Everyone's going to know what kind of man you really are. I didn't respond, just documented it and sent it to Parker. The next day, she filed for a restraining order against Megan for harassment and added it to our counterclaims against Vicky for orchestrating a campaign of defamation. The judge granted the restraining order immediately. Megan couldn't contact me, my brother, or my business associates, couldn't post about me on social media, couldn't come within 100 feet of my home or office. Vicky's lawyer tried to argue that Vicky had nothing to do with Megan's actions. The judge wasn't convinced, especially after Parker presented text messages from Vicky to Megan discussing ways to pressure Tom that we'd obtained through discovery. The next podcast episode was notably subdued. Vicky mentioned being unable to discuss certain personal matters due to ongoing legal situations. I thought things might settle into a legal rhythm after that. I was wrong. The next morning, I walked out to the parking lot of Brody's building to find my car with a long, deep scratch down the driver's side. The paint was gouged all the way to the metal, running from headlight to taillight. Security cameras in the lot had mysteriously malfunctioned overnight. I couldn't prove Vicky did it, but the timing wasn't subtle. $3,200 in damage. I filed a police report but knew nothing would come of it. Parker advised against accusing Vicky without proof, saying it would make me look vindictive. So I paid the deductible and kept my mouth shut, silently adding it to the mental tally. They wanted me rattled, cornered, exhausted. Instead, it steeled me. Every attack only confirmed what I already suspected. They didn't care about the truth. They cared about controlling the story. Too bad I stopped caring about stories a long time ago. I cared about facts. 2 days later, Vicky tried a new angle. She showed up at my office unannounced, asking my assistant if she could just talk to Tom for 5 minutes. Luckily, my assistant had been briefed and politely but firmly told her I was unavailable and she should contact my lawyer. Vicky left a note claiming she just wanted to work things out directly and was tired of lawyers. As if this was about saving on legal fees, not her realizing she was losing. I gave the note to Parker, who added it to our growing documentation of Vicky's attempts to circumvent proper legal channels. If she really wanted to talk, she could schedule a mediation through our lawyers. But she didn't want mediation. She wanted to catch me off guard. The week after that, Vicky's mother called my mother 3 times, crying about how I was destroying her daughter's life. My mother, to her credit, finally started to see through this manipulation. I told Karen that if Vicky hadn't cheated, none of this would be happening, she told me. She hung up on me. Parker advised me to stay completely silent on social media. No posts, no comments, nothing that could be twisted. I followed her advice, but it was strange watching Vicky's carefully curated narrative spread unchallenged. Posts about starting over, vague references to toxic situations, and plenty of support from her podcast audience who had only heard her side. Meanwhile, our lawyers exchanged mountains of paperwork, financial disclosures, interrogatories, requests for production, the mundane machinery of divorce grinding forward while the emotional theater played out in public. Discovery proved to be Vicky's undoing. It started with a standard income affidavit from her legal team, showing modest podcast revenue, marketing contracts, and minimal savings. It looked reasonable at first glance. Ms. Parker raised an eyebrow reading it. She's claiming just under $22,000 in liquid assets, she said, scrolling through the numbers. Claims most of her income goes to business expenses and her investment. She's lying, I said. Last year, she took 3 business trips to Miami, bought a MacBook Pro for podcast editing she doesn't do herself, and leases a BMW that costs more than our mortgage. Parker gave a short nod. Then let's dig deeper. Our forensic accountant was thorough. He traced everything: Venmo histories, PayPal accounts, even a content creation LLC she'd formed without telling me. We found unreported income from sponsored content, speaking engagements billed through Carly's husband's company, and a side gig consulting for a women's lifestyle brand. Then we found the secret account, $43,000 in a separate bank Vicky had opened, using her maiden name and her parents' address. Money that had been steadily transferred from our joint accounts over 3 years in small increments. What really sealed it was when our accountant discovered I'd left myself logged into our shared laptop. Another careless oversight. Vicky had used it to access our joint investment account after I moved out, transferring another $12,000 to her hidden account. The digital trail was unmistakable, and it completely undermined her claims of financial victimhood. Parker laid it all out in court, line by line, date by date. Vicky's lawyer tried to argue it was savings for emergencies that Vicky felt unsafe discussing with me. The judge didn't buy it. He didn't raise his voice or lecture. He just leaned forward and said, "Ms. Cooper, removing marital funds secretly over several years doesn't constitute emergency planning. It constitutes dissipation of marital assets." Vicky's face flushed. She stared straight ahead like she couldn't hear a word. The judge granted Parker's motion to include the hidden $43,000 in the marital estate calculation, ruled that Vicky had to return half to the estate immediately, and ordered her to pay $8,000 in legal fees for what he called deliberate obfuscation, requiring unnecessary investigation. In legal terms, it was a turning point. In personal terms, I saw it in Vicky's demeanor, a subtle shift from righteous indignation to defensive damage control. That night, Brody came over to my apartment with takeout. "Heard about the hidden account," he said, unpacking containers. "Remember when she forgot to tell you about that promotion because she wanted to surprise you with a trip, then never booked the trip, and still expected credit for the thought?" I added. Brody shook his head. "You know what I don't get? She had a decent guy who supported her podcast dream even though it made no money, who helped set up her recording space, who literally never complained when she'd cancel plans for emergency episodes, and she throws it away for some dude in a beanie. Her loss," I said, surprisingly meaning it. "Damn right it's her loss," Brody said, raising his glass. To Vicky finally getting screwed. 9 months after I walked in on Vicky and Beanie Guy, we stood in court for the final hearing. The air was thick with finality. Not drama, just the weight of conclusion. Reed still represented Vicky, but her arguments had shifted from demanding half my business to trying to secure better alimony terms. She wasn't trying to destroy me anymore. She was trying to salvage what she could. Judge Wilson had reviewed everything: financial disclosures, business valuations, asset lists. No dramatic speeches, just facts and figures. He ruled that the transfer to Brody would stand. The business was inherited, maintained as separate property, and transferred with proper documentation. The court finds insufficient evidence to void the transaction. But then he paused. However, the court does recognize a marital interest in the growth of the business during the marriage, and imputes a value of $75,000 as Ms. Cooper's equitable share. Parker didn't react. We'd anticipated this compromise. What mattered was the transfer itself remained valid. The investment in Brody's LLC was also upheld. The judge acknowledged the timing was strategically advantageous to me, but served a legitimate business purpose with proper documentation. Vicky sat motionless, eyes fixed on some middle distance. Then came the settlement. Reed had initially demanded $6,000 monthly support for 5 years. Now Vicky walked away with $32,000 total, paid in installments over 18 months. The judge noted her demonstrated earning capacity and failure to disclose assets as factors in the modest award. When the judge asked if both parties accepted the terms, Vicky finally spoke. "Do I have a choice?" Her voice was flat, resigned. "You can appeal, Ms. Cooper, but based on the evidence presented, I would not advise it," the judge replied evenly. She nodded once. "Then I accept." As we stood to leave, Vicky's purse slipped from her hands, spilling its contents across the floor. As she knelt to gather her things, she looked up at me, eyes brimming with unexpected tears. "I hope it was worth it," she whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. "Yes, it was," I said. She looked away, stuffing items back into her purse. We never spoke directly again. Outside the courthouse, I felt a strange lightness. Not victory, something quieter. Resolution. Parker shook my hand. It's done, she said. The paperwork should be finalized within 10 days. Thank you, I said, meaning it. The aftermath unfolded messily. Vicky's podcast lost its sponsorship after the recording of her meltdown leaked online. Megan was ordered to pay a fine for violating the restraining order. Carly eventually distanced herself from both of them, reaching out to apologize for getting involved in something that wasn't my business. Vicky didn't move back to Ohio like she'd threatened. Instead, she stayed in Arlington, working for a marketing firm and occasionally posting cryptic social media updates about healing and moving forward. Her podcast limped along as a solo venture with drastically reduced listenership. My friendship with our mutual friend Dave, my former college roommate, became a casualty of the divorce. He'd tried to stay neutral at first, but eventually stopped returning my calls. Last I heard, he and his wife still meet Vicky for brunch every month. Some connections can't survive the gravitational pull of divorce. What surprised me most wasn't how the legal system worked, or even Vicky's reaction. It was how quickly the narrative shifted once money was involved. Our mutual friends initially sided with her, the wounded wife whose cold, calculating husband ambushed her with divorce papers. But when the financial facts came out in court, when her hidden accounts and spending became public record, those same friends got suspiciously quiet. Brody's software company launched its logistics management platform 6 months after the divorce was finalized. We landed 2 major shipping companies as clients within weeks. The $38,000 investment returned itself threefold in the first year. My consulting business rebranded, focusing on supply chain resilience for mid-sized companies. We're smaller now, but more profitable, working with clients who value expertise over volume. I bought a townhouse closer to downtown. Nothing flashy, but it's mine. No podcast equipment, no constant drama, no walking on eggshells. Just space to breathe. People talk about winning in divorce like it's about money or property. But my victory wasn't in keeping the business or exposing her hidden accounts. It was in refusing to play the role she'd cast for me, the devastated, desperate husband willing to overlook anything to keep her. And that $10 I left in our joint account, worth every penny for the message it sent. You get back what you put in. Some lessons cost more than others. That one, she got at a discount. Looking back, I realized the signs were always there. The networking events that ran late into the night. The sudden interest in upgrading her podcast equipment whenever a new tech guy came around. The way she'd criticize my lack of ambition, despite the fact that my business supported both of us while she chased her dreams. But it's all right. Better late than never. Some guys get destroyed in divorce because they can't separate emotion from strategy. They're so busy feeling betrayed or angry that they make stupid decisions. I decided early on that wouldn't be me. So if you're reading this and facing something similar, remember, it's not about revenge. It's about refusing to be a victim. It's about taking control of what you can control and letting go of everything else. As for Vicky, last I heard she's dating some marketing executive 10 years older than her. Good luck to him. Hope he enjoys her podcast.